in order to give our vertebrates more structure, we're going to have to give them actual vertebrae, give them actual bones that are going to support their demanding and diverse structures and lifestyles. So this switch from cartilage to bone, moving from our sharks to our fish, is critical. So this bony skeleton actually has some downsides. While it gives structural support, the shark didn't have to worry about floating, being buoyant. The shark has that cartilage, so he's much more buoyant than an organism that has a heavy skeleton. So for this transition from cartilage to bone, most of our fish species are going to have to actually add an additional feature known as a swim bladder to help them float in the water column. So with our ray-finned fishes, or our bony fish, we look at this internal skeleton. That's terrific. Okay. But we also have to look at some other things associated with it. So we still have gills, of course, because we're talking fish. But now they actually have something known as an operculum that is a hardened structure covering these gills to give support to the gills and the surrounding tissue of the gills so that the gills can function properly. It actually turns out that this operculum is a really neat way to look at things evolutionarily, because they can be easily found in the fossil record. Pretty neat, okay? And that swim bladder we talked about as well. So with our bony fish or our ray-finned fish, you would know them. They have kind of these spiky fins associated with them, so you'd be able to pick them out pretty easily. Spikes can come in different shapes and sizes. Something like our balloon fish here, or our seahorse, has these spikes as protection as well, right? And for things like our flounder, remember he sleeps on his side down on the bottom, so both of his eyes have actually evolutionarily moved to one side, but he still has these bony or ray fins associated with him. The lobe fin is the next derivative of these fins, and the nice thing with the lobe fin that we've looked at before is evolutionarily we look at this movement into a tetrapod structure, or 4-foot structure, right? So this is our link. Our lobe fin fishes are our link eventually to amphibians. Now, instead of having these kind of spiky fins associated with them, they're much more rod-shaped, and we've looked at them before. Today there are 3 lineages alive of our lobe-finned fish. The coelacanths, which we actually thought were extinct for a long time, but they've been found again. Lungfish we've talked about before, critical evolutionarily to show plate tectonics. And then tetrapods. So as we mentioned, this kind of 4-foot structure, amphibians, reptiles, and so on. So descendants of the lobe-finned fish. And here's a coelacanth. Not exactly a picturesque sort of animal, I suppose, but you see there's kind of this intermediate here where they still have sort of these feathery structures associated with their fins, but this is the important part. So this is a very cylindrical, fleshy structure that attaches the fins to the body rather than just bone or those rays that we saw before. So across our evolution with our tetrapod structure, we've got our ray fin fish up here at the top, so those are our bony fish. Our coelacanths and our lungfish fall into our lobe fin fish category. Okay, and then we start to see this shift and this increased number of bones associated with the pelvic and the pectoral girdles, so hips and shoulders. Okay, and you see that over time the fins are moving underneath the body. So rather than being straight out the side like we have with our ray fin fish, they start this movement to where they actually are positioned more underneath the body, And so the idea there, of course, is when we move into a tetrapod structure, the limbs are underneath the body to support the body, and then the movement onto land becomes much more natural. So again, this kind of pelvic and pectoral girdle is setting up, very different kind of design, so that we can get those legs to move underneath the organism. So structurally, it's much easier to move around.